Welcome back to the Behind Their Business podcast, or if this is your first time listening, welcome. Today, our guest is going to share about raising kids and running a business on a shoestring budget. She's also going to talk about what it was like to quit her day job by setting up multiple income streams. But in her business, our guest is a freelance writer and tech coach who helps writers and business creatives learn the technology they need to make money from writing online, which is awesome. And she's been freelancing for nearly 20 years. So she's been doing this for a little while. She has a lot of experience that she can share with us. And she has also raised 4 kids as a single mom, which just in itself is mind blowing. And now she has 10 grandchildren, 2 dogs, 2 cats, and 2 geckos. So a lot is happening in her world, which is so great. So please welcome to the show, Meg Stweart. Meg, I'm so glad you're here.
Hi, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you again. So let's go on a journey of what you were doing before you started your freelancing journey. Lots of
hmm
journeys happening here.
Yeah,
So
it kind of
take us
was.
back 20 years ago.
Yeah, it kind of was several journeys, but I started out working in education. So I was working for a community college in a women's center. So I did that for 10 years, and that started as like a work study job while I was going to college. My oldest 2 kids were in diapers then. So that was in the 90s, 90 to 93 in there. And so I was working, going to school. I had my 2 older kids by the time I was 21, um, and working full time in education. And then from education, which, being in the women's center, it was more social service oriented too, helping women who were returning to school. I ran a single parent support group and then went from there to do life skills training as a facilitator. And then that kind of got me into working with domestic violence victims and homeless women and families. And so then I transitioned from the college into social service. So I was doing case management. So I worked with, again, transitional housing. I worked for a while in Cleveland with homeless veterans, helping them to find jobs and get, back into employment. So lots of kind of education and social service in the beginning when I first started out. And so while I was doing all those things, I was freelancing part-time. So I started doing that in 2003, I think, is the first year that I started freelancing. And I was not doing writing as much as I was doing tech stuff. So like I had a guy in Nevada who was starting a logistics business, and I helped him kind of get that going and get that started and build a website and that kind of stuff. Then I had a guy who was a VP of finance in Silicon Valley, and he had retired but then gone back to do consulting, and the younger crowd was making fun of him because he didn't know how to use his BlackBerry. So that tells you how long ago that was. And so he would call me and say, okay, this is what I need to learn this week because this is what they're making fun of me, about. And so I would help him with that. So the initial tech stuff, was in the 2003, probably 2003 to 2005, maybe. But then I started writing, probably like a lot of other people. I've always felt like I was a good writer, and why not, right? If this is a way that I can make some money. So that's what I started with. And I started again the way a lot of people start, which is on Upwork, um, which I don't recommend to people. But if you do need to, sorry, I'm trying to turn this off. If you do need to go with Upwork, what I tell people is don't stay there forever like I did. I stayed on Upwork for 5 years doing freelance work. And in that 5 years, I made about $70,000 total. So you can make money on Upwork, but it's you work very hard for very little when you do that. So then I broke away from Upwork and started doing clients directly, working with clients directly. And one of my clients that I was writing for on Upwork actually bought out my contract. And that was what kind of started me doing work directly with other clients rather than through Upwork. So I wrote for that client for another 5 years, probably separate from Upwork, and then just kind of gradually added from there. During that time, around 2008, I think it was, yeah, 2008, I had my fourth, I was pregnant with my fourth child, and I moved from the city, which was east side of Cleveland, to the country on a 10-acre farm. And so everything changed, and I had a lot more time, which is what I wanted, was to be home with my kids. And because now I have the two younger ones. And so I took some part-time stuff. I knew I wanted to do consulting, business consulting. So I took some part-time stuff that was not nonprofit, because I had worked like social service and education and not really business. And I wanted to get some experience in the business arena. So I deliberately took jobs that were part-time, like as a VA. And so I worked 6 months in an accounting firm, and then, a couple of weeks for a telecommunications company. I was just kind of jumping around doing some part-time stuff, and just figuring out, the things that I saw in kind of education and nonprofit, were those also in business? And they are. Systems, systems is a big thing in business. Makes a big difference. So I got to a point so when I first started, I was working full time and I was freelancing kind of on the side. Then I got to the point where I could work part time and freelance the rest of the time. And so that was cool. But still not enough money, right? Not enough. I was working all kinds of crazy hours to get that amount. What I found made the most difference for me when I decided I wanted to stop working outside of the home and be total freelance was setting a goal, right? So initially I set a goal and said, okay, to make all of my bills and be able to not work this part-time job, I need about $2,400 a month. And so I set that goal and started working towards it. And it took me probably 6 to 8 months to hit that consistently, to where I felt like, okay, now I could let go of this part-time job, right? Because the part-time job was paying the bills. Because as a single mom, that's what I needed to do, was make sure I could pay the bills and put food on the table and all that stuff. So once I had hit that consistently enough to where I thought I could leave the part-time job, then I did. And so then from that point on, I was totally freelancing. And that was about, my youngest daughter was born in 2008. So it was about 2010, between 2010 and 2011, because my father passed away in 2011. And I spent 2 weeks with him in hospice and was able to like stay there the whole time, and just took my laptop with me, and I was doing some writing, I was doing transcription, all of which I could do like right from his hospital room. And it was kind of that point where I said, wow, like I never want to go back to doing a 9 to 5 again. I mean, when you're raising kids, and those of you who have kids, you have a full-time job, but then you also have, get them up in the morning, get them ready to leave, get them on the bus, get to work on time, do the whole thing in reverse at the end of the day, and then homework and bath and all of that kind of stuff. So what I found was just working as a freelancer allowed me to be home a lot more for my kids. At that point, my two older ones were leaving, they were 17, 18 years old. But my younger girls, there's 15 years between my older kids and my younger kids. So my younger girls were still home, and I got to be home for all that stuff that I had missed with my older kids. My older two kids spent their whole, like all their days and all their summer in daycare, right, while I was at work. Whereas the younger kids, I got to be there during the day and, go outside and put up the slip and slide and let them run all over. And, I got to be there for all those things. So that was the thing that, what I say is, it puts the freedom into freelancing, right? When you can set your own schedule and, I worked at midnight if I wanted to, if there was something we wanted to do during the day, then I would work, after the kids went to bed until midnight or whatever. Or I'd get up early, and get up at 5 a.m. And by 10, 11 o'clock, I was done with the work I needed to do for the day, and we could go do whatever. So, and I've been freelance writing ever since. I did in 2019, I joined Ninja Writers, which is a writing community. And in early 2020, I started teaching just some free SEO calls for people who were kind of tech challenged and didn't know a lot about SEO. And the founder of Ninja Writers got word that I was doing these calls, and a lot of her Ninja Writers were coming to them. And so she came and said, hey, do you want to teach that call for me, for my community? So I did that, and she paid me for that every month. And I was actually making more doing that call for her than I was doing it for myself, So it made sense to go ahead and do that. So I did that for her. And then the other thing that happened was she had her academy workshop. She had somebody drop out of teaching on her at the last minute. And so she messaged me like on a Friday and said, hey, I need somebody to teach this 8-week workshop starting on Tuesday. And I said, okay. And so I took that on. And so, then I was getting paid for the tech calls and getting paid for doing the academy workshop. And so that just added to my income. And so what I found is that having multiple income streams was really what kicked it into gear for me. So during the pandemic, I tripled my income by making those multiple income streams. So I was writing on Medium, I was doing some private coaching, I was doing freelance writing, and then I was doing some work for Ninja Writer. So I had multiple income streams. I also self-published a book during that time, a little short story fantasy thing. It didn't make a whole lot of money, I think about $60. But it's another income stream that, I do have a whole series of those in mind to do. So that's what I tell people all the time, is looking at having multiple income streams. So whether that's as a freelance writer means you have multiple clients, or whether you're doing freelance writing and then you're also self-publishing, doing that kind of work. You could be teaching classes, you could be, doing podcasts. I mean, all of that kind of stuff. I'm working now with some of the Ninja Writers because I am on staff with them now, after doing the contract work in like September of 2020. I went on the team with them. So I do have a regular amount of money that comes in every month for the work that I do for Ninja Writers. So, and that's significant. And then the freelance writing, the self-published book, and I have another series I want to do on freelance writing that will be part of that income stream. But one of the things I'm teaching in Ninja Writers this coming season is affiliate income. So like, using your affiliate links in your blog posts or in your writing that you're doing, whether that's for yourself, like when I write on Medium, I have affiliate links, or when I'm sending out my newsletter, I have affiliate links. But also when you're working with clients. So as a freelancer, there's a lot you can do as far as adding value. So you're providing this written content, and some freelance writers also provide images. I don't, because I feel like that's a legal area that I don't want to get into as far as the licensing and stuff. I would rather the client do that themselves. But I do provide, SEO optimized content. I do provide, the linking, if they have affiliate links that they want to use in the post. I will do that, that kind of stuff. So there's a way for you to add value for your clients by providing those additional services. So, I always tell, go ahead.
I was going to say you've shared so much. This has been okay. Great. So yeah,
if I'm talking too much, you can say,
no, you're fine. You're fine. I didn't want to cut you off because you were like in a good flow state. So like the biggest thing here is like the different income streams, which is so important. You never want to put all of your eggs in one basket, because if that basket goes, then you're screwed.
Right.
you know.
Yeah, and I
Um,
had that happen, where I was working for one client on Upwork for like 2 years in like an hour, more of an hourly full-time role. And I had let go of all my freelance clients at that point. And then that job wasn't a good fit anymore. And I had to start over, right? So I had to get all my clients and get new clients, get some of my old ones back. So that's what made me realize that you can't just go all in on one thing if you have the multiple income streams. And like now, like I can ramp up if I decide. I don't do a ton of freelance writing right now, but I do more coaching and the stuff for ninja writers. But if I needed extra money, I have a list of probably 35 clients where I could just send out an email and say, hey, I have some time in my schedule next week. Do you have a project for me? And boom, I would have, work that I could do to make extra money. So I can ramp that kind of up or down as I need to, which I like.
yeah, I call that like turning on the faucet to where like if
Yeah,
you want
right.
more money, it's like
Hmm.
literally coming out, or if you
Yeah. Do you
don't,
want
you can
more hot
just turn it
water?
off.
You turn this knob. You want more cold water? Turn that knob. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
agree. I like that.
I want to go back to something that you mentioned in the beginning. So I have two things that
Okay.
I want to dive into that. So you mentioned that you
Okay.
went from the city to the country and living on a farm. So was this
Hmm.
like an actual farm with
Hmm.
animals that you had to tend to, and or was it just like
Yeah,
acres of land?
we had, it was 10 acres. We were leasing it. What happened is my mother went through a divorce around the same time that I got pregnant with my youngest child. So she was born in 2008. So this was like probably April-ish of 2008. I was working full time and doing freelancing on the side again. And I ended up in the hospital. They thought I had preeclampsia and all this stuff because I was almost due. And so they put me on bed rest for the last month of my pregnancy. And while I was on bed rest, I just did some real kind of soul searching and said, this is not how I want to raise my younger kids. And so I called my mom and I'm like, I got to do something different. This isn't working for me. I need to get out of the city. My older kids were teenagers and they were not doing well in the city. I was pretty sure that my son was getting kind of sucked into the kind of gang life, and I wanted him out of that. And so when I called her, I didn't know that she had been having problems, but when I called her, she was like, "Oh, well, I've already been looking because I'm, getting divorced, blah blah blah." And so we said, "Okay, well, let's do something together." And so we found this 10-acre farm that was for lease. And, we leased the 10-acre farm. My mom already had animals. So we moved the animals from her place where she was to this farm. So we had horses, we had chickens, we had goats. I actually had our goat, her name was Cora. Um, we didn't realize when we got her that she was pregnant. And so my mom had called me one day from work and she said, hey, it's really cold. Can you go check on Cora? I know she's due soon, but I don't know when, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. So we're on this farm and the snow was like crazy deep. And so I had to get all dressed and everything and go to the barn. And sure enough, she had not one goat, but 3 goats. And, goats are not supposed to give birth in the wintertime. You're supposed to manage that so that they give birth in the spring. But it was actually Martin Luther King Day that these goats were born, and there were 3 of them. So we named them Martin Luther and King. So we had all kind. We had goats, we had horses, we had chickens, we had a peacock for a little while, who we called Mrs. Peabody, and
So what was
she
that
got lost in the
like?
storm. It
Oh,
was
poor baby.
lovely. I loved it. I absolutely
But
loved it. I mean, my younger
I'm
my
just trying.
younger girls, and at the time, my oldest daughter and her son, was living with us. So I had my 2 youngest, and then I had her oldest son, who is a year younger than my youngest. I mean, wait, a year older than my youngest. So my youngest right now is 14 and her oldest son just turned 15. Um, so they were basically raised together for probably the first 8 years of their life. Um,
I'm just
and
trying
they
to
got to be
imagine
on the
what all of
farm. They got to,
this was like. Like you had this farm that you obviously have a lot of work to do, right? You are working
mm-hmm,
part-time at this point, like you said. You have
mm-hmm,
this
yep,
business that you're
and
running, and you have
freelancing.
children. Like, did you sleep?
Yeah,
I can't imagine.
not much.
I was gonna say.
Not much. And that's one trick, that I can tell people who are maybe trying to leave a job, by building a business is one of the things that I used to do when my kids were young is I would put them to bed at 8 o'clock and I would go to bed too. And I would set my alarm for midnight and I would get up at midnight and I would work till 4. And then I would go back to sleep and I'd get up with them at 7 and get them ready to go to school and everything. And that was kind of my way of having quiet time, so that I could focus and I could work without, all of the distractions that come with having kids because, you can't really focus when you've got kids running around. And I only had, 2 little ones, because there's 15 years between my older kids and my younger ones. So when my 2 youngest were small, my older kids were teenagers. So that was helpful. But my older 2 kids are 14 months apart. So that was kind of like having twins because for 6 months at a time they'd be in the same stage, and I'd feel like I was going to lose my mind. Okay, they're both putting everything in the mouth or they're both playing with the stuff in their diapers and like I can't do it. So my younger 2 girls are 4 years apart. That was much better. But by the time I had my youngest, I also had my first grandchild. So they were kind of raised together. And so and then my son's girlfriend had a boy who is the same age as my oldest grandson. They're both 15 this year. And so he came. And so a lot of times it was Josh, Hayden, and Sydney. And then Samara was 4 years older, so she was there, but it was kind of the 3 musketeers, Josh, Hayden, and Sydney were together. But they were around the animals. They got to hold the chickens, and we also had dogs. We had 2 dogs. We had a cat that showed up in the middle of the storm with all kinds of infection from a wound, and so we had to nurse him back to health. And so we called him Stormy because he showed up in the middle of a rainstorm.
Oh
But
my
then as
gosh,
soon as he was like all healed up and stuff, he took
I
off.
just feel like the stories in
So,
your life are
but I
never
wasn't.
ending.
They are, but the I guess the thing of it is that what happens with the freelancing is I get to set my schedule, and that's what's made the biggest difference for me, right? Because I can be there for the grandkids. I can be there for my kids when they got something going on at school or whatever, because I can adjust my schedule the way I want to. And so the thing I would say to people who are just getting started freelancing is the mistake I made in the beginning and the mistake I see people making now is that they freelance, but they're still acting like an employee. So like they want the client to tell them what they're going to write, and they want the client to tell them how long it's going to be, and the client tells them how much they're going to pay, and the client tells them when it's going to be done. I don't do that anymore. And I found that making that shift between being an employee who works from home, so basically remote work, right, where you're working from home, but your work is still directed by the client. So that's remote work. But when you're freelancing, you're more of an entrepreneur where you are the business owner and you are making those decisions. So I decide what content I think is best for the client. They might give me, keywords if they've done the keyword research. Lots of times they haven't. They might give me titles, and then I may push back and say, this title is better for SEO. We need to make that change, so I'm the expert when it comes to content. And I'm not afraid to push back with the client and say, look, okay, somebody told you need to have a blog, but you don't know why you need a blog and you don't know what it's going to do for you. So let me explain kind of how this works. And so once you tell them kind of how it works, then they're good with that. So, and I tell people when I have time available in my schedule. So if a client says, I have this project, and I say, okay, I have this time available and I can have it back to you by this date. And so that's how I am able to set my schedule so that I don't end up with clients who are calling me on Wednesday and saying, hey, I need this by Friday. No, my clients know that if they have a project for me, they have to get me the details by Friday, because that's when I'm scheduling my stuff for the coming weeks. If they don't get it to me by Friday and they send it to me on Monday, it's going to sit there until Friday when I make my new schedule. So, and so I think making that mindset shift between being an employee who works from home and being an entrepreneur is the key to being able to have the freedom that you want with freelancing. And also, as far as your rates, other than a magazine or a publication, which have very strict kind of what they'll pay, the clients don't dictate my rate. I tell them how much it's going to cost for a blog post, and again, that's what allows me to have the freedom, so that I don't feel like I'm just working from home. I'm still in the 9 to 5, but I'm doing it from home, right?
Yeah,
That's
for
not
sure.
the freedom that I wanted, right?
Yeah, and I'm so glad
So,
that you mentioned that, because I talk about this all the time. My free community is actually called Confident CEOs,
mhm,
because so many people, I mean, you
right,
also don't know any better, right? Like when you're in a 9 to 5 job, you're an employee. If you've never built a business before, you don't know
right,
how to do anything other than that. So it's very, very
right.
common for most people to just carry over that employee
Hmm.
mindset when they start to build their business. So if you're listening to
Hmm.
this and you're like, oh, I think that's me, and you're like slowly raising your hand up, it's okay. We've all made that mistake before. I made
Right.
that mistake in the beginning stages too. But
I did too.
yeah,
Yep, I did too.
it's all about building that confidence in yourself, which is
Exactly.
so incredibly important no matter what stage of business that you're at, because there's always going to be
And
new things coming up.
right. And it also, though, having that confidence and having that freedom of being an entrepreneur also comes with this responsibility, right? So, as the content expert, it's my responsibility to stay on top of what is good for SEO, what length of content, what kind of content is going to work for that client. That's my responsibility. I can't be that expert if I don't stay on top of what those trends are. So, you also have to keep learning, and stay up with what's changing and what's happening so that you can be the one advising the client as to what's best for their business. Um, so I
Yeah.
think it comes with that responsibility as well to learn as much as you can, to know that what you're telling the client is what's going to have the best chance of working for them. So as a freelance writer, you want to know everything about, the buyer's journey and SEO and all of that kind of stuff, which is going to come into play when you're writing content for a client.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I know you've been talking a lot about content, but it and copywriting, but it's just all service providers and generally it's like it's basically the same
Yeah.
across the board,
Yeah.
regardless of what you're doing. So this has been
Right.
such a good conversation. Thank you for talking about so many different things on this episode, Meg. It's been great to hear your story, hear all of the different stories that you shared, and then just some really helpful tips for people who may want to get started freelancing, or maybe they are currently freelancing right now. So if somebody wants to connect with you, where is the best place for them to do that?
They can email me. It's meg@solutionsbystewart.com. I also have a website, solutionsbystewart.com. And for people who are freelance writers, I have a newsletter called Market Mondays, that I put out, which you can get that if you go to my website as well. But the newsletter's free. It's all kinds of like writing jobs and magazines and publications that pay writers. And I send that out every week. And it's free. So people can sign up for that if they are freelance writers. And then I'm also on Medium. You can find me on Medium. I have a publication on Medium called the Freelance Ladder, and it has all of my tips and tricks are in that publication somewhere. So if you are low on budget and you just want to read as much as you can, check that out, and you can read everything over there.
Perfect. And we'll make sure to link to all of that in the show notes as well. So thank you again for
Awesome.
being here, Meg. This was a great
Great.
conversation.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks for having me.